Hi, everybody. My name's Dan. I'm on the community team here at Datadog. I'm an engineer, so I do actual coding. And I'm here today to talk about a subject that is, well, interesting to me, and I hope interesting to you as well. It's about cloud cost optimization. And this is really just a first look at some of these subjects. If you're new to the world of cloud spend and thinking about how to optimize that, hopefully this is going to be helpful, interesting, entertaining, dare I say, for you as well. Now, this is certainly a primer on cloud cost optimization, but in many ways, it's also a discussion about how to shift left on cloud spend. Because as I said previously, I'm an engineer on the community team here. And when I'm thinking about cloud spend, when I'm thinking about resources that I'm using in the cloud, I'm not always thinking about what does that mean to the bottom line of the organization. I'm thinking about what does that mean if I am deploying my software? Does that mean if I'm, configuring my auto scaling groups and so on and so forth, right? And are my services, are my products, are my things doing what I expect them to do in terms of latency, in terms of availability, in terms of reactivity, and so on and so forth? These are things that are concerning to me and concern me as a practitioner. A lot of times, how much it costs, traditionally, I'm not thinking about it that much. But in reality, there's a strong argument to be made for practitioners, for the people who actually have the hands-on keyboard, right? HOK, I love that acronym, to actually be involved in this idea of how much are we spending and does it make sense, right? And there are clear advantages to this, both individually and organizationally, as we'll see over the course of the next few minutes we have here together. So while this is definitely a primer on cloud cost optimization, again, really what I want to get to the heart of is this idea of shifting left on this conversation. Okay, so a little bit about me. Again, my name is Dan. I'm an engineer on the community team at Datadog. I'm a recovering system administrator. I've spent the vast majority of my career doing, as a system operator, a system administrator, a Unix systems analyst, DevOps engineer, web engineer, site reliability engineer, right? So, sort of that evolution of terms, of titles, of responsibilities over the past, a number of years, not to give away my age. But today I'm on the community team, again, at Datadog, where I'm not directly on the day-to-day responsible for the uptime of systems anymore. Nonetheless, this is stuff I really do like to talk about and stuff that I work directly with engineers to internally and externally to get them up to speed on. Other things I'm involved in is DevOps. I love DevOps, and I'm part of the DevOps Days conference series. I'm a global chair in that conference series. And in my private life, as well as my professional life, I really like to measure things. Really into measuring things. So working at Datadog, an observability company where we can measure things, is a good fit for me, I guess. So you have my details there. If you want to shoot me an email, if you want to check me out on the tweeters, you have my handle there, and you have my portfolio as well. If you want to check out some other talks on other technical topics that I've done, over the years, feel free to do so. All right, let's just give you some background on me, more or less to try to build some legitimacy with you as an audience. That I'm not making stuff up here, right? I'm boots on the ground, hands-on keyboard. Again, as a practitioner, this has been my bread and butter for most of my career, and even through to today. So the stuff I'm going to be presenting here is not imaginary. All right, this is stuff that I have gained from real-world experience and continue to work on. And I just really pleased as punch that I was given an opportunity to share it with you here today. All right, so first thing I want to talk about is the cloud, right? Let's talk about the cloud. If you're not down with the cloud yet, then wow, incredible, right? We're going to be talking about cloud spend today. So if you're not familiar with the public cloud, then maybe hit pause, go do some research, right? But we are going to be talking about the cloud today. And I'm going to start basically with some numbers. I'm going to throw some numbers at you. All right. And this is just to give you context. When we talk about cloud spend, when we talk about, you know, dollars and cents, euros, yen, pesos, rubles, whatever you want to call it, you know, that's moving from one bank account to another as a result of the cloud. This is what we're talking about, right? Take a look at those numbers. We got at the top, the unquestionable, you know, elephant in the room, the behemoth of public cloud, which is Amazon Web Services, AWS, right? Has a revenue, has been around a little over 26 billion US dollars in revenue. These are statistics from last year, by the way. You can see there the source at the bottom. It's a Gartner report. Check out that URL. If you want to read the whole report, there's a lot of good stuff in it. So I've just extracted a couple numbers for us to think about here today. But Amazon Web Services, right, $26 billion in revenue, a 40% market share, 40% market share. But look at that year-over-year growth. 28.7, 30% year-over-year growth when it already has a 40% market share at $26 billion revenue. That's incredible. Now, I'm not here to try to get you to go buy AWS stock, right? Because you're thinking, wow, those numbers are really good, right? No, what I'm trying to express here is that the whole world is spending money on cloud. And not only is the whole world spending money on cloud, the whole world is spending more and more money on cloud every single year. It's not slowing down. It's not a fad. It's not reaching some sort of plateau, right? This is continued real world growth. And we look at some of the other competitors in the space. We look at Azure, right? Nearly 13 billion US dollars in revenue, nearly 20% market share. But look at their year-over-year growth, 60%, 60%. That's incredible, right? So industries, not just computer people doing computer things, right? Not just us nerds, but every single industry across the entire planet, every market sector, everywhere, spending money on the cloud. Alibaba often doesn't get included in conversations about public cloud in certain spheres, right? But they're huge, okay? $6 billion in revenue, 9% market share, over 50% year-over-year growth. GCP, look at that year-over-year growth, 200%. All of this, again, to just give you the context that when we're talking about the investment in public cloud, we're not talking about a little bit of money. We're not talking about a little bit of velocity. We're talking about enormous sums of money at eye-watering velocities. And anytime you're talking about spending a lot of money really quickly, right? You need to start thinking about, wait, does this make sense? Right? Am I doing this efficiently? Am I doing this correctly? How do I know that that's the case? And that's really what we want to drive at here today. So just give you some other, some other numbers to think about, right? These enormous sums of money that we're talking about being spent annually on public cloud. The velocity of growth that I alluded to earlier, it's incredible, but it's not all gravy, right? It's not all good spend, quote unquote. There's good spend and there's bad spend, right? There's things we need to spend money on, and there's things maybe, wait, is this perhaps wasteful, right? So get that real money, that $64 billion of annual spend, that 41% annual growth. That's real money that's getting spent. But conversely, there's also real money that's getting wasted, right? And that has to be respected, right? I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to be like, oh, we're throwing money into a fire and it's burning. Like, we're not here to raise our emotions. We're here to look at this realistically and understand the scope of the issue, right? So that $64 billion of annual spend, approximately $17 billion wasted. And again, here we have another report from DevOps.com, which you should definitely, again, check out because it's super interesting. Read the whole thing, not just this part, right? But I pulled these numbers from here. It's an excellent report. We got $17 billion of 64, not 17 billion of, a trillion. 17 billion of 64 billion. That's a big percentage, right? That is, by estimates, just getting wasted. Wasted, like, what does that mean? Right? Like, how you're spending money. We need the auto scaling. We need the queuing. What are we talking about getting wasted? Right? It's getting wasted. So some quotes here, right? From another report from Flexera. Again, hit pause, go to this URL, check it out. Okay, these reports are super important, super good, very well done. And I'm going to do the thing I always tell my engineers not to do when they're doing presentations, and I'm going to read from the slide because I think these quotes are extremely critical. Between idle and over-provisioned resources alone, that's $17.6 billion in cloud spend that will be completely wasted this year. And the potential is even higher. That's important. And the report goes on to talk about why that is, but keep that in your mind, that this number is probably only going to get bigger unless we do something about it. That's a minimum of about $5 million wasted per day, every day this year, and again, the reports from last year, that could be reallocated toward other areas of the business. That is shocking to me, and it should be shocking to you, right? We're talking about $6.6 billion, for example, just in oversized resources, for example, right? And I put that number up there because to me that one is wild. Like, we're over provisioning to the tune of $6.6 billion annually. As an industry, as a group of industries spending money on cloud. That is shocking, right? And we need to do something about that, right? And again, I'm getting to, well, how do we shift left? What are you talking about, Dan? I'm getting there, trust me. But I just want you to really understand the scope of why this is important, all right? Because it really is. And a lot of people don't even realize. So I think we can all agree then that this is a problem, but as your middle school teacher probably told you, every problem is also an opportunity, right? So how can we turn this problem into an opportunity? Well, let's talk about that. So we talk about the side effects of cloud waste. Wasted spend is correlated with, poor standardization, or worse yet, it's correlated with anti-patterns. Okay. For example, if there's no easy way for developers to reuse patterns, then everybody reinvents the wheel. And that is going to be strongly correlated with a loss in productivity, right? For reinventing the wheel over and over again, if we keep making the same mistakes, but in novel and interesting ways, right, then we're not actually solving the problem of wasted cloud resources. We're just shuffling the problem around, right? So wasted spend is correlated with poor standardization and the implementation of anti-patterns that lead to reduced productivity. This is an important item. And again, keep this in mind as we're talking about this idea of shifting left. Like, what can we do as practitioners? Already we're starting to see it here, right? At least we should be. Now, that poor standardization is often a symptom of a lack of governance and oversight across the enterprise, especially the larger your organization gets, the more the lack of governance and oversight can really hurt, right? And this results in an increased risk surface, Why? Because validated models, when we talk about governance, we talk about standardization, right? Validated models are easier to reason about. At least they should be. If they're not, you need to rethink your models, right? But they should be easier to reason about. They should be easier to audit because they're well understood by many people in principle. And they're easier to manage, again, for those same reasons, okay? All of this is part of a heightened security posture. When you have these things, you have a heightened security posture. The inverse, of course, is also true. When you're using unvalidated models that are difficult to reason about, that are impossible to audit, that no one understands, much less manages correctly, right? Then you have a reduced security posture. You have increased risk. And again, this is related to cloud spend. You're wasting money on this. So not only are you just wasting money, you're also doing it in a way that's dangerous for your organization, right? Which is, right? You need to do something about that. That money, right, literally could and should be spent on other things. All right. That's money that you could be spending on hiring, right? That's money that you could be spending on skill leveling. That's money that you could be spending on salaries and bonuses, right? And philanthropic adventures and all sorts of good things. But instead, that money is just making your organization riskier, is serving to potentially not hire the best talent, is resulting in reduced productivity. And to what end? It's just making public cloud shareholders somewhere slightly wealthier, right? So when we talk about wasted money, when we talk about the cloud, right, we're not just talking about money leaving your account. We're talking about all of these important side effects for your organization that come as a result of these issues, of this problematic cycle, right? That's important to respect as well. And each one of these things is an area where us as practitioners can actually have a positive, beneficial, meaningful impact. And I think that's actually really cool. It's very empowering. And we're going to talk about how to get there, right? So brass tacks. Wasted cloud spend, okay, is a vampire that is making your organization weaker. All right, end of story. But it's not all doom and gloom, because again, as I mentioned earlier, every problem is also an opportunity. So let's talk about opportunity, right? Let's talk about how do we turn this, oh my God, this is scary and I'm terrified, and Dan, you need to help me out here because, okay, take a deep breath. Let's talk about opportunity, right? Your opportunity, in fact, again, as a practitioner. So all that stuff's pretty scary, astounding, and it is, right? But as a humble engineer, what part could you possibly play, right, in this terrifying world of budgets and forecasts and risk postures and all this stuff, right? As it turns out, you and I are actually in a great position to not only contribute to this discussion, but to help drive it in legitimately valuable ways. And because we have at our disposal, right, unprecedented access, never before seen as technologists to date. Today, we have unprecedented access to extremely specific resource usage information, extremely precise billing information, extremely granular data on exactly how and what is being used by who, when, why, in ways that would have been impossible 10 years ago, 20 years ago, et cetera, right? Or at least so expensive to calculate that it would have offset whatever savings you would have gotten, right? Why do we have all this in a way that we didn't have it before? Well, one, we're just maturing, right? Technology, IT is maturing. So we're better able to break these numbers down and collect these numbers. We have better tooling out there to gather this information, to report on this information. The whole world of observability, right, and monitoring is vastly improved today. But it's also part and parcel of the cloud ecosystem. All of the major cloud providers offer programmatic access, one way or another, to all of that data, to all of that usage information, to all of that billing information, and in some cases extremely granular, right? But what does that mean? It means metrics, ultimately, right? In one form or another. And what's a metric, right? Well, actually, let's take a step back here. What's a metric? When I say it's metrics, well, that's good, but what is that, right? Well, a metric is a point in time and a value at its most basic, right? A point in time and a value. In the modern world of computing and observability, we're going to rub some cardinality on there, right? In the form of tags or, whatever particular verbiage you like to use. So the metric is a point in time and a value with a little bit of metadata, right, mixed in there. And that, my friends, is the sort of things that we as engineers, right, as programmers, as infrastructure engineers, as operators, so on and so forth, we work with this stuff every single day. We work with numbers and points in time every single day. And we're pretty good at it, right? This is stuff we're pretty good at. We've got good tooling, we've got good frameworks, we've got a high level of experience working with metrics as an industry, as practitioners. And again, all that resource information and all that billing information, at the end of the day, it's just timestamps and numbers and metadata. And it's available to us if we want it. In the same way that all the other good stuff, the cloud is going to report on, how full your queue is, hard drives filling up, how much memory, how many, Kubernetes clusters you got deployed, so on and so forth. All this other stuff that we're used to talking about, we can use exactly the same language and exactly the same tooling and exactly the same thought process to think about resource usage and billing. That's cool, right? So we've got that availability of billing minutiae. And as I said, the billing data is just that, it's data, right? And we have programmatic access to that data, okay? And if the data is metrics, which is absolutely our wheelhouse, then why aren't we using it? Right? It's a good question. It's a good question. Why aren't more of us as practitioners diving into this world? Because we can, but we aren't for the most part. Well, there's often a really big disconnect between the people designing the product and the people building the product. I'm not saying this is the case where you are or where I am, but I'm saying industry-wide, this is often the case. Now, there can be a lot of reasons for this, okay? And one of them is often that the two groups just don't speak the same language. They just don't, right? I don't mean a human language, although that could also certainly be true. I'm talking about terminology, shared experiences, zones of interest, right? But the language of, budgets, the language of trade-offs, the language of optimization, right? These words, these things cross boundaries. That first one's important, budgets, right? We're talking about money and we're thinking, oh my God, I don't even have a budget for my household. How can I think about a budget for a company? No, don't think about that. Think about things like error budgets, right? If you're working within the context of SLOs and SLIs, right? Think about the terms of you've got your CI/CD pipeline, and you're allowing yourself a certain amount of variance before you go to the next stage, or a certain amount of variance before you go to prod. Those are budgets, right? So we as technologists, we can talk about budgets. We can talk about trade-offs. We talk about trade-offs all the time. We think about frameworks. We think about making decisions about how we're deploying our software, right? Optimization. We love to optimize stuff. I love extracting an extra couple of milliseconds, right, out of an endpoint just to make it go a little bit faster. That feels good, right? We love optimization. But these things cross boundaries. These words, these concepts, this way of thinking about things is going to be true in a lot of areas of your organization. So once you can get these two different groups of builders, of makers, because ultimately that's what we're doing, we're building, we're making, we're creating, right? Talking about things in the same way, you automatically get a better product. And that's actually really cool. Organizationally speaking, right? For you individually, you now get a seat at the table in product decisions. And it gives you visibility. It grants you access. It raises your stock, right? So not only do we have benefits organizationally when we start to talk about things in the same way, you individually as a practitioner are gaining benefits career-wise, professionally, right, within your organization. And that's powerful. And once you've got these different groups of people with different perspectives and different ways of thinking and reasoning about things, all working together, that's when innovation happens. We love this word innovation, right? And how do you get that? How do you get innovation, especially if your company's been around for a while, your velocity maybe is slowing down a little as you move to the enterprise, and that's normal and true because there's more regulations, and that's okay. You have to stay innovative, and this is one of the ways to do it. We can start to move beyond our bubbles and our comfort zones and really start bringing fresh ideas and insight at a business level as practitioners. And that's powerful, okay? And it all starts with this very basic, simple idea of what he's spending on the cloud, right? Get involved in those product discussions, bring insight to those business decisions, literally generate new value that didn't exist before. That's cool, right? That's compelling. At least I feel like it is. So we literally generate new value. And we're now talking about completely flipping the script of this entire presentation and going from, okay, how much value are we wasting? How much money are we throwing away? To, oh my gosh, look at the money we saved. And what's more, look at the new value we're generating, which is galaxy brain stuff, okay? And this is the stuff that makes careers, right? This is the stuff that literally makes careers. It's the stuff that takes you as an individual from a mid-career engineer to senior, for example, right? You could be really, really good at deploying cloud resources. You could be really, really good with like a Ruby framework and a real sniper on that thing. And that's going to get you so far in your career. And if that's what you want out of your career and you're fulfilled by it, then you know what? All blessings to you. All right. Other people sometimes want to advance, want to do different things with their career. They want to move in different directions in their organization. And this is one of those ways to do it. You can move from career to senior because you're engaging in different conversations, because you're bringing new insight, because you're generating value. You can move from staff, move to distinguished. How you do it, this is it, right? Your capacity to move beyond technical solutions into and technical problems and to take on these larger challenges, that's the ticket to leveling up your career. So all this started with, oh my gosh, we're spending so much money on cloud, and how do we solve that as a problem? And I said, actually, this is a conversation about shifting left, isn't it? This is it, right? Now you're thinking to yourself, okay, this sounds great. Dan, I'm sold. I'm all in. I want to level up my career. I want to generate new value. I want to drive innovation at my company. I want to use metrics to do it, right? I'm sold. We're all in, but how, right? And the answer, you probably saw it coming. I'm biased, right? Because I work at Datadog, is to use Datadog, but really it's to use the observability tooling that's available to you because you have it. You have the data, you have the tooling, you just have to use it in ways that you haven't used it before. Okay, that's the secret. So I'm going to show off a couple of items here. So just give me a quick moment while I change my screen share. Okay, and I'm going to show you basically a dashboard, right? And so what are we going to get out of this dashboard? Well, we're going to get, I think, some interesting things, or at least I hope some interesting things. So just give me a second to share my screen here. All right, so let's take a look at the demo here. Now, I have to stress, all the numbers that I'm about to show you here are made up. The dashboard is real, the collection mechanisms are real, the arguments and conclusions and everything I'm about to present are absolutely applicable to the real world, but the actual data that is being used to power these dashboards is completely made up. So don't try to read anything into this. It's for demo purposes. But again, everything I'm about to show you here is really just to illustrate this larger point of what can we do as practitioners to enter these conversations and have a meaningful impact. Now, I'm going to show you some Datadog dashboards because I work for Datadog, and that's the tooling I have available to me. But if you're not a Datadog customer, maybe you should be, but if you aren't, then you should probably have some similar tooling available to you where you can, collect metrics and numbers and build dashboards and things out of them as well. I encourage you to take a look at that. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a dashboard that we've built to give us an idea of how much we're using and how much we're spending and where that is happening, right? So say, for example, here we have instances. And in this case, we're looking at AWS. You'd be able to build a similar thing for other public cloud providers as well. I happen to build this for AWS, right? We have a total number of running instances for a given product or a given section of the organization. And another item here, which is underutilized instances, which I'm going to get into in a moment, how that can be calculated, right? What that could mean. We break this down by host type to get an understanding of what are the actual hosts that we're using. We're talking about these running instances. What are they, right? It's good to know because they do have an impact not only on how much we're spending, but how we're actually using those resources. We have some really messy diagrams here about least utilized CPU instances. And I make this sort of a little bit messy on purpose, just because it's a little bit more interesting to show off visually. But in the real world, you'd be breaking this down, kind of instance by instance. We can also break this down, for example, of running instances by team. And now here's where it starts to get interesting, right? As we can actually take a look at these teams, and we've got some made up teams here, right? Big data. This one, we don't know. We need to work on our deployment mechanisms to get the right metadata on there to get their tagging going, right? Platform team, security services team, like whatever, right? What are these teams actually using, right? How much of our cloud spend is dedicated to each of these business units, each of these product units, right? That's good and interesting, valuable information to know, because you can take that information and then go again, have meaningful discussions with the actual entities that are consuming these resources. Does it make sense? Do they need more? Do they need less? Do they need it differently? Right? To dive in there. Running instances by service, and here again too, I need to maybe a little bit more metadata on there, right? But Consul, AppGate, right? Some good stuff there. And then running instances by application as well. So you can just see different ways to sort of break things down. It doesn't just have to be, is the front end team using 100 virtual machines, right? No, like maybe in fact we could start to think about this as in the context of service delivery. We can start to think about this in the context of a product-oriented mindset. We can start to think about this in the context of an application deployment mindset. And these don't have to be separate from each other. In fact, it's better if we group these things together because it gives us an holistic understanding of how and where we're spending the money, as opposed to just focusing in on the one thing that maybe we're familiar with, or the one way of thinking that is predominant at our organization. Instead, take exactly the same data and exactly the same, cardinality information and so on and so forth that's available to you, and just start looking at slicing and dicing it in different ways. And this visual representation is a really handy way for us as humans to start to get a feel for what's going on, right? That's really the power of a dashboard, right? Is as a tool to help our human minds visualize what are in some cases extremely large, extremely complicated interrelationships and data sets. That's the power of a dashboard ultimately, right? So we see 100 instances. We have a bunch of underutilized instances, and we're curious, like, what does that mean? Underutilized instances, right? How are we actually calculating that? So we can take a look here, and we happen to have a metric that's available to us, underutilized combined hosts, right? We're actually taking a look at what is the CPU utilization that is available, and how much of it are we actually using over time? And then we break that down by various sets of our metadata. And then we can come up with a number. Now, this doesn't help us to drill down into individual instances. That's what the other stuff here does. But why it's useful to have these two big numbers is because they're bold, is because they're meaningful. It's because this is the sort of thing that you can bring to that initial conversation, right? If you come to someone who's not already an AWS expert, if you come to somebody who's not already a deep technologist like you, right? And you go, we're underutilizing 13% of our M5A 2x large instances in this particular region under this particular time frame, eyes are going to glaze over. It's not going to mean anything, right? But if you can come and you go, we got 100 machines, and we're underutilizing a fourth of them, right? We're overspending on 25% of our EC2 instances. Boom. That means something. That's a good conversation starter, right? And that's a good place for you to start that conversation. So this particular instances, we can also take a look at spend, right? Because we go, okay, well, we're overspending on 25% of our EC2 instances. I mean, that sounds bad, but like, is it? Right? I mean, how much money are we actually talking here? $5? I got 10 euros in my wallet, right? I'm happy to lend that to you. You know, how much money are we talking here? Right? Well, this is how much money we're talking, right? Look at that total compute spend in this particular instance, estimated at $170,000 US, you know, a month, which is a moderate spend as these things go, okay? But you extrapolate that out, that means $47,000 US just on underutilized instances alone. It's getting thrown away with all of those related things that we talked about, all those bad things about wasting money, how we can do other things with the money and the security posture and so on and so forth. Again, here, we're not coming at non-technical people or differently technical people with our own jargon and having their eyes glaze over. We're coming at them with the same language. We're coming at them with exactly the same conversation starters that they want to hear, that their managers want to hear, that their managers' managers want to hear. This is that new insight we're talking about. And this is the level of power that you can bring to these conversations by looking at this data and using it in new and interesting ways. And of course, then we can break that down by, you know, instance type, hourly. How much is it actually costing us hourly, right? Sometimes this is interesting to be able to bring to the table, like we're literally overspending $8 an hour, right, per instance, right? That's meaningful, right? And then, of course, breaking that down again by team, by service, by application, because you want to be able to have that cross section, that looking at ways in different dimensions. You don't want to go finger pointing at a specific team because maybe that team is actually spending things appropriately, right? Maybe it's actually the team is responsible for 13 different applications, and one of those applications unfortunately suffered from a poor deployment policy, right? So you don't want to go, oh, they're doing things poorly. No, it's actually just that one app that's screwing up, right? So not only can we bring this new insight and this new information, we can do it in political and diplomatic ways, which is very, very important, right? And if we scroll over a little bit here, and you know, this particular dashboard, I made it so it could be like on a widescreen or like a television, right? So we'll scroll over a little bit here. We don't just talk about the doom and gloom. Never just talk about the doom and gloom. Every problem is also an opportunity, and this is the opportunity. Come with the numbers. What can we actually be saving here? What can we actually be bringing to the table in terms of a solution? Our potential optimization here is also very important, right? We talk about a maximum optimization if we were to do everything perfectly, which is impossible, but it's a good number to have as a target, $22,000 US, right? If we fix all the problems we have. Potential optimization is maybe more realistically around $6,000 US if we just maybe make some minor adjustments to how we're deploying and how we're utilizing our EC2 instances. We take a look at that hourly, again, by team, by service, by application, right? Come at it with that same language of diplomacy. You're not just presenting a problem, you're also presenting a solution. And that is key, it's clutch, it's powerful, it's important. And it's going to propel you and your organization into new and better and more interesting places, safer places, right, as we saw earlier, which is also important. So how do we get this data? It's going to change depending on your organization, what cloud provider you use. The ways that you have to collect this information is going to be different, right? If you happen to be on AWS, They've got a whole an endpoint and a big old CSV file that you can download about your billing and usage data that you can ingest. If you, again, happen to be a Datadog customer, we have some tooling for that. But tailor whatever you have to your particular instance. And again, it's just metrics. It's just points in time and numbers. That's all it is. And it's already cardinality you have. You're already deploying with Terraform, right? You're already configuring your services and your apps with all that good team and app and region and so on and so forth information, either from there or second out of Consul at runtime, right? So you've already got all this information available to you. Now you just have to correlate it. And that's where you shine, right? With your observability tooling, with your dashboard tooling. I really could deep dive just on this dashboard. To be perfectly honest, this could be an hour just talking about how this gets built. We don't have that time. We don't have that time, right? But I do want to show you another example of something you can do. And here we just sort of break it down in slightly different ways, right? And talk about EC2 cost optimizations. And you could really even get into a point where you're breaking it down by the number of instances per team and service, and then going and really diving into individual elements. And this is important not because it's part of that larger language, but because this is where you can then take that information, that data, and not only bring it to the product people, not only bring it to the business people, not only bring it outside of your area of expertise, but then also amplify it inwards towards you and your team and your specializations and your peer group around you at your place where you work, right? It doesn't not just go this way, it could come back this way as well, right? Dive into the numbers, dive into the nitty-gritty, right? And then that's where you as the practitioner can enact change. Upwards with the right conversations and the right language, and well, downwards, but horizontally, right? With the real data that you can use to build better deployments, to increase security posture, to propose standards and rationalizations. And it all starts with you just shifting left and thinking about cloud spend as metrics. That's the only thing I want you to take away from this presentation. I hope this was interesting to you. Feel free again to contact me. I gave you my contact information at the very beginning. Would love to chat more about this stuff. That's all the time I have for today. So thank you so much to Hashi for having me on. Love working with HashiCorp. And hope to see you again very soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
I'll just unmute my mic. There we go. Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. I had fun, putting that material together. As you can see, it was pre-recorded. I don't think that was an illusion or whatever. So that's why I look a little bit different now than I did on the video. So once again, thanks everybody for watching. Again, I do hope you found it interesting or compelling or at least entertaining in some way, shape, or form. Before we get into the Q&A, I actually like to just give a shout out to Karim at Hashi. We actually did this presentation together the first time together, right? And we had this idea of talking about cloud tooling and talking about deployment mechanisms. And we thought, you know what, that I guess been done, right? Like I talk about collecting data with an agent, we talk about deploying with Terraform, but like where can we go with this that's something a little bit different? And maybe something that's gonna not just help people to do the job that they're doing now, but help them to do the job that they want to do a year from now, or 2 years from now, or whatever, right? And this is kind of what we came up with, was this idea of what actually takes you to the next level, right? And it's thinking about problems outside of your immediate scope. And what I find really, again, compelling about this is these conversations, which for a very long time were kind of out of bounds for practitioners in a lot of ways, right? Because you didn't have the access to this information. You didn't have the legitimacy to even really talk about it, right? Now it's available in ways that was never available before. And it's available in ways that we're already very good at working with. So, I said at the end of the presentation, the only thing I want you to take away from this is that it's just metrics, right? You don't need to be scared. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So so again, yeah, big shout out to Kareem for working with me on the original version of this presentation earlier this year. Would be remiss if I didn't mention his name. So let's take some questions. So this is it's a big topic, right? There's a lot of different directions to go on this. And one of the questions that comes up kind of right away is, and of course it's going up, is this stuff open source? So yeah, right. At the end of the day, well, okay, hopefully your billing data is not open source or public. Although I don't know, maybe it is, right? In which case you might need to check an IAM policy on that. But the actual like code to generate the dashboards and deploy that with Terraform is actually available, and we'll see about making that available. We'll send that out. You can also hit up my portfolio site, and I mentioned earlier. It's got the links to previous presentations that have been done on this. We have links to GitHub repo and all this stuff so that you can actually take a look how these dashboards are built. Of course, they're Datadog specific. Take a look at Terraform code to deploy them if you happen to be using Terraform, and see how that works together. We've got some other tooling as well to do some data scraping and stuff like this. So again, either check my portfolio, we'll see about maybe making that available as part of the follow-up emails that will inevitably get sent out. If this isn't the tooling that you happen to be using, and that's fine, right? Then it becomes a more general question of how do we access this data? And I mentioned in the video that different cloud providers are going to make this available in different ways. Now, I'm generally more familiar with AWS as a cloud provider than I am with the other providers. That's just more my wheelhouse, right? And in that in that particular provider, there's a whole, I don't know, maybe product's a strong word, right? But there's definitely like an endpoint, and you can grab this data from it in a couple of different ways. You can generate it, through the site as a CSV and so on and so forth, right? And other cloud providers have similar mechanisms, right? So what do you do with this? You're going to need a couple of pieces, okay? If you're going to roll your own on this, the billing data is of course very important, and it's structured. It is arguably going to be the easiest thing to obtain because you just hit an endpoint and download it, and then figure out what whatever structure you need to parse, right? Rub a little Perl on there if you're feeling old school, and ingest that, right, into whatever format it needs to be ingested. You're also going to need how much stuff costs, which is different from how much you're spending, right? Because resource utilization is correlated with spend. The keyword there is correlation, right? You don't necessarily have the causation depending on how that data is being presented, okay? And again, different providers are going to think about this in different ways. With AWS, you're going to not only have to get your cost information, your spend information, your resource utilization information. You're going to want to cross-index that with how much the things actually cost to run, right? So again, in the case of AWS, that information is available to you programmatically. How much do EC2 instances cost per hour? How much do I happen to harp on EC2 instances because that's what I built the dashboards for, but it could be anything. So how much do these resources, right, actually cost? And then how much of them are you consuming? And then from there, you can inject all of that data into your tooling, right? So you're going to have a database of how much stuff costs and a database of how much you're using. And that's kind of the general idea of how you start to build this stuff, right? Now, again, I'm being a little bit generic here because everybody here is going to have a different way of different public or even private cloud providers we haven't even talked about here. And the information is going to be available in different ways, but that's the idea. So you need these two sets. You're going to inject that into your observability tooling or your whatever tooling you're using, right? And you want to do that in a structured way. Now, in our case, when we're building this stuff using Terraform, we just basically made up a little dotted format metrics series, right? Where we basically said, AWS dot, thing dot cost dot whatever, right? Wait, it's standardized and we can use it kind of everywhere. And if you've got a little, autofill metrics explorer inside of your tooling, then you can just start typing in like, I don't know, price, cost, and stuff starts to pop up, And that's important too, right? You don't have to go hunting and pecking for things that are named in weird ways. Uh, and that's going to be clutch for you in terms of not impeding your progress in terms of building this data and having these conversations. But in my experience, not only at Datadog, when we started looking at this stuff in this way, and now that I've gone and had opportunity to speak with the community, the larger community, speak with you here today, right? People go, this looks great. Like I want to do this. I can get access to this information. I can build these dashboards. Yeah, like let's roll this out. In my experience, this gets other people on board, right? Because people realize, well, actually, wait a minute, there's cool stuff here. And individual teams will go, wait a minute, like I actually want to start thinking about this in ways I hadn't thought about it before. And maybe there's like some predictions we could be making there. And maybe our tooling actually has some forecasting capacity built into it, right? And maybe our tooling has anomaly detection built into it. Spoiler, Datadog has these things. But when we start to think of this as metrics, when we start to think about this as not weirdo, we got to put a credit card down and then our cloud provider takes money off and then we phone our rep because we think it's too much. We separate ourselves from that to a certain degree. And we just think about this in the realm of timestamps and values. Again, I keep coming back to this because this is a really, really important for you to understand it. It's not something to be afraid of. This is something that should be very, very familiar with. We can start to, with all the same tricks you already have, all the same tools you already have, start to think about, budgets and money, right? I have a pretty good feel for some of the services that I run, what their usage patterns are like, right? There's some, I have a couple of things that I run that are more used, for example, during the week than they are on weekends, right? That's just how it is. Focus on that. And they're more used by people in European or EMEA sort of time zones than they are by people outside of those time zones. And so I can start to see these patterns over time. There's some seasonality there, and you're going to be able to say the same thing about the stuff that you're running, right? You get a feel for how your systems are and how people are using your systems, and you go, the numbers go up and down like this, and then there's a spike because something happened. Okay, that's fine, right? But these same mental models that we have, right? These same ways of thinking about, I know I'm going to need X number of instances, right? Or if I'm deploying a cluster, I know for a fact that I'm going to, at generally speaking, around 9 a.m. on a weekday, I'm going to need to scale this up, and I'll let an autoscaler handle that, and it's going to scale back down. But I know what generally my minimum number is there, and I can make some predictions, and I can do some forecasting on that, right? And I'll go, over time, over the past year, more people have been using this particular service. We've been having to scale up to greater numbers than we had in the past. And we go, well, okay, we can predict that forward. And maybe we need to make a change to our configuration so that we're not stuck doing like, cold starting and waiting for autoscalers and whatnot, right? And this is normal. This is normal stuff that we think about as infrastructure engineers. Exactly the same mental models, exactly the same tooling, exactly the same deployment patterns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But instead of the metric, which is autoscaling group, or the metric, which is, cache deployment, stuff like this, we just pull that out and we insert how much stuff costs, right? And so when we run our pre-deployment tooling, when we're doing CI/CD pipeline, we're doing our tests, right? Suddenly that becomes a place where we can start to look at this data and think about this data, right? If I deploy this thing in this way, how much is that going to cost? Right? We don't have to wait even necessarily till after the fact. Once we've started gathering this data, once we have it available to us, once we have some ability to look historically at it, especially. But even out of the box, we get some good stuff right away. If I deploy this thing, how much is it going to cost? Right? Is it what I expect? Did that make sense? Right? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I actually already know what my budget is, and I think, what, I have room to spend, and talk to your product owner. Your product owner goes, yeah, actually, you know what, we can spend differently. We can deploy to a more expensive resource, or a lower latency resource in order to get a better user experience, right? Because we now have the ability to make those determinations in a way that we didn't have them before. And that's really cool, right? So I guess at the end of the day, and I said this already, I'm going to say it again before we sort of wrap up here, is that you don't need to be afraid of any of this. Again, it's just metrics, it's just numbers, it's just timestamps, it's just tags at the end of the day, right? And the biggest impediments I've seen to interacting with this stuff are one, just a lack of awareness, really, that this is something that one can do and interact with, and now we've dispelled that, right? So you're good now, you're aware, so no problem, right? Second impediment is sometimes more political, sometimes more structural, right? If you're in an organization that has various security policies and access policies and things, which is good, you should have those things, right? But some of them are sometimes more restrictive than others, and maybe your particular login does not have access to the endpoints or the resources necessary to collect this information. And then that's when you're going to need to have a conversation with whoever can give you access to that, right? Maybe it's your manager, maybe it's somebody on a security team somewhere, whatever that means, right? So you could go to that person, that entity, that group, whatever it is, and go, I want to access billing data. And they're going to look at you like, what? Why, who are you? Why do you access? Go away. So don't do that. Instead, right, come with this stuff we've learned here today, right? Come with these ideas that you have now, right? Come with these ideas like, I know, I'm intimately familiar with the technology. I'm intimately familiar with the software and the resources themselves. And I want us to have better conversations around this, right? So if you present it that way, you present that business case for having access to this stuff, then there's not going to be a lot of reasons for them to say no. And if they do, they say no, well, I don't know, I guess there's not much you can do about that, but hopefully they say yes. Right? And then so once you've got, okay, we're aware of this, we now have access to this stuff. The following thing after that is just getting buy-in from whoever it is that is responsible for your time. If you're in your organization, maybe you get to work on your own stuff on your own time, and that's great. Maybe you've got a manager, or maybe you've got tickets that you have to fill out, so you got to file a ticket, whatever that means structurally, right? Just make sure that you have the time to actually sit down and work on this in an unimpeded way, just as if it were a real project. It is a real project, but just as if it was any other sort of thing that was in your wheelhouse to work on. This shouldn't be treated like a side project. This shouldn't be treated like a thing you're doing on flex time or like stuff like this. I feel like that's maybe not the right approach, because that to me feels like maybe you're taking it seriously, but that's not how it's going to feel to anyone else, right? Make sure that this is a real project. Make sure that you've got real buy-in, whatever form that takes for you and your organization. And set yourself goals, set yourself deliverables, set yourself a timeline, all the stuff you do, right? And that keeps you on track. It keeps the people you report to aware of your progress, keeps everybody honest. And when you're meeting those goals, you're meeting that, and you're working on that timeline, it's part of that packaging that I was talking about, right? It's not enough to do the work. You almost have to sell the work, right? You have to sell yourself. And that's a big part of up-leveling your own career. So I guess we're at 59 minutes and 30 seconds now. So I don't want to consume your time. We at 60 minutes slotted. There's a lot of good stuff here. Again, you have my contact information at the start. Another question just came in. It was a great presentation, insightful. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Slides and video recording be available? Yes, I'm sure they will be available. So that'll come out afterwards as well. If you didn't take fast enough notes, that's okay. All this stuff will be available afterwards. So thank you so much to everybody who attended. Thank you so much for the questions, and we'll see you on the internet. Bye, everybody.